I was trimming roses in the sunroom when I heard hushed voices drifting in from the dining room. At first I thought it might be about the upcoming Prescott Foundation Gala or one of Gerald's manufacturing ventures. But the tone was sharp, cutting. "She's nothing but a parasite," Samantha's voice hissed, low but unmistakably angry. A 68-year-old gold digger who latched on to Dad when he was vulnerable. I froze, pruning shears suspended midair. Then came Eric's voice, cool, calculated, and every bit as cutting. "Relax. The prenup's airtight. And while she's off playing garden club or whatever tomorrow, we'll meet with the attorney to amend Dad's will. She won't see a penny, not a cent of the Prescott estate." Samantha laughed bitterly. "She acts like she belongs here, like she built this house." I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I didn't storm in and demand respect. So instead, I carefully set down the shears, smoothed my apron, and smiled. They had no idea who I was. To them, I was just Elaine Prescott, their father's second wife, an old woman with silver hair and a quiet presence who hosted Sunday brunches and arranged flowers in rooms they barely used. They thought I married Gerald for money, for the estate. They had no clue that I once ran boardrooms where real fortunes were made, that my maiden name Elaine Vaughn once graced the cover of industry magazines. They had never asked. And for 3 years, I never told them. I endured the sideways glances, the condescending remarks at family dinners, the way Samantha would introduce me as Dad's wife with just the right pause to signal her disapproval. I let them believe I was powerless. Because sometimes it is not about what people think of you. It is about what they will learn in time. And time was something I had planned all along. The day I married Gerald Prescott, I chose silence not out of fear but out of control. But that silence had just expired. Because the Prescott children were planning to erase me. And they were about to find out that the woman they called a parasite was about to own the room. And every room after that. Most people assumed I had no history before Gerald, that I appeared in his life from nowhere like a shadow attached to his fortune. But long before I became Elaine Prescott, I was Elaine Vaughn. I built logistics routes across 5 continents, sat at negotiating tables with steel magnates and oil tycoons. And for 40 years, I was married to Joseph Vaughn, the founder of Vaughn Maritime, a shipping empire that quietly powered half the global supply chain. When Joseph passed away, I became the sole shareholder. My name wasn't plastered across magazine covers, because I preferred it that way. Power, to me, had always worked best in silence. After his death, suitors came like moths to flame. Charming men with expensive cufflinks and hollow intentions. It didn't take long to see they were after the empire, not the woman. So I withdrew. I traveled. I gardened. I healed. Then one spring evening, at a charity auction in San Francisco, I met Gerald Prescott. He didn't recognize me. Didn't know my last name. He handed me a glass of wine, commented on my laugh, and told me I reminded him of light on water. He pursued me like a man who still believed in letters and lilacs. He showed me softness when I had forgotten what that felt like. And for once I was seen not as a widow, not as a prize, but as a woman. So when he asked about my background, I answered simply, "I'm comfortable." That was true. Unbelievably comfortable. Comfortable enough to fund the entire event anonymously and never mention it. When he asked me to marry him under the stars at his vineyard, I said yes, not because I needed his world, but because I finally trusted someone in mine. But his children never looked past the surface. To them, I was an old woman with modest clothes and a kind smile, a gold digger who never wore designer heels, who preferred vintage rose tea over boardroom scotch. They thought I was after the Prescott name, not knowing that I had spent decades guarding a name far more powerful. For 3 years, I let them think I was fragile, because sometimes letting people misjudge you is the greatest advantage of all. And now they were about to learn just how big a mistake they had made. Because Vaughn blood runs deep. And I had just begun to prepare the tide. Gerald came home just as I was finishing the floral arrangement. He greeted me with that same warm smile that had first drawn me in 3 years ago. His presence still made my heart soften, even after everything I had overheard. We sat for lunch in the breakfast nook, the afternoon sun pouring through the windows. I stirred my tea slowly, trying to decide how much to say. "Your children stopped by earlier," I said, keeping my voice steady. Gerald's eyes darkened slightly. "They didn't tell me they were coming." They wanted to talk business, something about the estate, about amending the will. He sighed. I can imagine. I watched him for a moment, this man who had brought joy back into my life after years of calculated loneliness. Gerald was a good man. Honest, fair, but blind when it came to his children. He saw the best in them, even when they acted with the worst intentions. And for 3 years I had said nothing. I had smiled through their passive-aggressive jabs, ignored the tension in their voices whenever I entered a room, and never once corrected their assumptions. Because I didn't marry Gerald to start a war. I married him because I loved the way he made me feel seen again. But love does not require silence in the face of betrayal. So after he left to take a business call, I made one of my own to Jonathan Dean, the man who had been the Vaughn family's legal counsel for nearly 5 decades. A brilliant mind and a loyal guardian of the empire Joseph and I had built. He answered on the second ring. Elaine Vaughn, he said, always using my maiden name when speaking in confidence. It's been a while. I need your help, Jonathan, I said, my tone low. It's time. I told him everything, the whispers, the plan to rewrite Gerald's will, the years of subtle disrespect. And I told him what I intended to do next. You're ready to reveal it all, he asked. I am, I said. But I want to do it strategically. I'm not here to humiliate them. I want to make it clear who I am and why I've stayed silent. He chuckled softly. When they realize the woman they've been trying to race owns a shipping empire 10 times the size of their inheritance, I imagine silence won't be their first reaction. Let's prepare everything, I said, the financials, my holdings, and a proposal. A proposal? He echoed. Yes, I replied. If they want to treat me like a threat, perhaps it's time I offer them an opportunity instead. Because this was no longer just about respect. This was about control. The Prescott Industries boardroom was sleek and modern glass walls, a walnut table that seated 20, and a view of the San Francisco skyline that never failed to impress visitors. So I had visited the room before, but only as Gerald's quiet companion, a gracious wife, never the center of attention, always the guest, never the decision-maker. Today would be different. I dressed deliberately that morning, a navy blue suit, sharply tailored. Not flashy, just commanding. Around my neck, I wore a single strand of pearls passed down through generations of Vaughn women. I arrived precisely on time, just behind Gerald. Samantha and Eric were already seated. Catherine, the youngest, and always the most reserved, nodded politely when I entered. The others barely looked at me. Gerald took his seat at the head of the table. Before we begin the quarterly review, he said, I'd like to give Elaine the floor for a few remarks. That caught their attention. Samantha blinked. The floor. I stood, slowly, confidently. Yes, just a few words. I opened the leather folder Jonathan had prepared, the Vaughn crest embossed discreetly on the front. I met their eyes one by one, no anger, no theatrics, just calm. For 3 years I've been honored to be part of this family. I've stayed quiet, even when assumptions about me were loud. Eric shifted in his seat. Samantha folded her arms. I understand why some of you thought I came here with motives, I continued. After all, I was older. I wasn't flashy. And I didn't speak much about where I came from. I placed a single sheet of paper in front of each of them. That ends today. They glanced down, confusion blooming into shock. Balance sheets, asset overviews, shareholder holdings, net worth statements, my signature across the bottom of each one. I was born Elaine Vaughn, I said. My late husband Joseph and I built Vaughn Maritime from the ground up. I am the sole shareholder and chairwoman of the company. My daughter Rebecca now serves as COO. The room went silent. Even Catherine's eyes had widened. My net worth exceeds 9 times that of the Prescott family estate, not because I sought it, but because I built it. Samantha opened her mouth, then closed it. Eric's hand gripped the document a little too tightly. I never corrected your assumptions because I wanted to be loved for myself, not my bank account. And I never sought to interfere in family matters, even as I was treated like a guest in my own home. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. But yesterday, I overheard your plan to alter Gerald's will, to leave me with nothing. And that crossed a line. Gerald sat quietly beside me, hands clasped, his gaze steady on his children. To be clear, I don't need a penny from the Prescott fortune. I never have, but I will not be erased. I turned to a new section in the folder. What I'm offering today is not a defense. It's an opportunity. They flipped the page. A proposal: strategic collaboration between Vaughn Maritime and Prescott Industries. A merger of shipping and manufacturing that would elevate both companies. Catherine leaned forward, reading intently. Samantha looked stunned. Eric said nothing, but his eyes were calculating now. This partnership, I said, has the potential to change the trajectory of both companies. But it requires trust, respect, and transparency, values I've waited 3 years to see. I closed the folder gently. Now that you know who I am, the next move is yours. Lunch was tense. We gathered in the private dining room of the Metropolitan Club, a place chosen for its quiet elegance. Gerald and I arrived first, joined shortly after by Catherine. Samantha and Eric came in last, silent, stiff, and avoiding eye contact. We ordered quickly, more out of habit than appetite. It was Samantha who finally broke the silence. So let me get this straight, she said, voice tightly controlled. You've been a billionaire this whole time. And you said nothing. I met her gaze evenly. That's correct. Why, she asked, almost breathless with disbelief. Why pretend to be someone else? I wasn't pretending, I said calmly. I was simply choosing which parts of myself to share. At my age, Samantha, you learn that not everyone deserves access to your whole story on day one. Eric leaned forward. And now you expect us to just what? Applaud you. Be grateful that the person we misjudged turned out to be richer than all of us combined. No, I said, my tone still gentle but firm. I expect nothing. But I will not apologize for your assumptions. Catherine cleared her throat. Actually, I think we owe you an apology. Samantha shot her a glare, but Catherine went on. I judged you too. I assumed you were just here for comfort. But after today, I see how much strength it took to stay silent. And to still offer a partnership after all of this. She looked at me sincerely. That says more about your character than anything on those documents. I offered a small nod. Thank you, Catherine. Samantha stabbed her salad without looking up. You could have told us. And you could have asked, I replied. But you didn't want to know. You had already decided who I was. Gerald finally spoke, his voice calm but weighted. Elaine has shown more restraint and grace in 3 years than I've seen in a lifetime of business. And she's offered you something remarkable, a second chance to see her clearly. Eric looked down at his lap. That proposal, it's legitimate? Yes, I said. My team has already run the forecasts. The opportunity is real. But I won't move forward unless it's based on mutual respect. He nodded slowly. I'd like to review it more thoroughly. Of course. Then, unexpectedly, Samantha looked up. I still don't like being blindsided, she muttered. But I'll admit I misjudged you. Badly. That's enough for today, I said. We all need time. No one argued. No one stormed out. That in itself felt like a small miracle. As we left the club, Gerald took my hand. You handled that with grace, he said quietly. I looked up at him and smiled. I didn't spend 40 years building empires to lose my composure over a few bruised egos. He chuckled. They'll come around. Maybe, I said, maybe not, but now at least they'll have to come around on my terms. 1 month later, everything felt different. Gerald and I had quietly moved out of the Prescott estate and into my townhouse in Boston, a brownstone with character history, and my name etched into its foundation. For years I had kept it quietly maintained. Now, it felt like home again. Catherine visited twice a week. She had taken a growing interest in the Vaughn Foundation's work, especially our scholarships for women in STEM. She asked thoughtful questions, brought ideas, and really listened. I could see the gears turning in her mind every time we spoke. I never imagined I'd be sitting here learning from you, she told me one afternoon over tea. I always thought you were just, she trailed off. Just what? I asked, gently. A quiet wife in a big house. I smiled. Sometimes the quiet ones carry the biggest stories. Eric had requested a follow-up meeting with my legal team. He was combing through the logistics of our proposed collaboration contract terms, operational overlaps, regional assets. He hadn't apologized again, but his professionalism spoke volumes. He had stopped treating me like a threat. So as for Samantha, she was still cautious, guarded. But she had joined a video call with my daughter Rebecca and me to discuss leadership models in family businesses. She even offered a few suggestions. She's thawing, Rebecca had whispered afterward with a smirk. Gerald remained proud but private. He never gloated. He never said, I told you so. But every time he looked at me now, I saw something new in his eyes, respect layered upon love. At dinner one night, he raised his glass across the table. "To new beginnings," he said. I clinked my glass gently with his, to being seen clearly. At last. Because this time I wasn't hiding. I wasn't the background character or the convenient explanation for someone's inheritance paranoia. I was Elaine Von Prescott. A woman who had built her life twice, once through industry, once through love. And now, perhaps a third time through legacy. Not just what I would leave behind, but what I could still build. With the ones who chose to see me for who I really was. I sat by the window that overlooked the harbor, a familiar place that had witnessed so many chapters of my life: joy, loss, reinvention. That morning, I had received an email from Rebecca. "Mom," she wrote, "I keep thinking about how they treated you. I would have lost my temper on day one. How did you stay silent for so long?" I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. "It wasn't silence, sweetheart," I typed. "It was strategy. For 3 years, I let them underestimate me, let them assign me a label I never asked for, because I knew something they didn't. True power doesn't shout, it waits. If I had stormed into that house waving balance sheets and bank statements, I would have proven nothing. But by staying still, by giving them time to reveal themselves, I gained something far more valuable than their approval. I saw their character, their loyalty, their fears. And I gave them the chance to grow. Some took it, some still might. But either way, I never lost sight of who I was. Not a gold digger, not a burden, not a woman clinging to wealth. I was, and still am, a builder. Of companies. Of legacies. Of families too, if they'll let me. And perhaps the greatest revenge isn't found in outrage or courtroom battles. It's found in being exactly who they said you couldn't be without ever lowering yourself to their level. So to anyone who's ever been dismissed, diminished, or underestimated, let them talk, let them judge, let them plot. Then, when the moment is right, let them see. Exactly who you are. Exactly what you've built. And exactly why they'll never forget you. So that's my story. It didn't end in courtroom drama or fiery ultimatums. It ended with truth. With clarity. With a room full of people finally seeing the woman they had ignored for years and realizing she had been holding the keys all along.
Not just to fortune, but to something far more powerful. Legacy, vision, and the quiet strength that doesn't need to scream to be heard. If you've ever been treated like an outsider, if you've ever been told you weren't enough or that you didn't belong, if you've ever sat at a dinner table, smiled through condescension, and still showed up with grace, then I hope you know you are not alone. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud, it's steady. It's choosing dignity over reaction, wisdom over war, and walking away not with bitterness, but with full awareness of your worth. Let them underestimate you. Let them write you off. Because one day, when the truth comes to light, it won't be you who's unprepared. It will be them. And if this story touched something in you, maybe reminded you of your own strength, your own journey, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments or your story. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this of strength, clarity, and quiet triumph, go ahead and subscribe, because the world has enough noise. But stories like this, they remind us who we are and who we can become. So until next time, stay strong, stay grounded, and never let anyone else define your worth.